Muzzy can find a way using his lineup. But, funny to note that both these players do have Rogue in their lineups, as, Rogue has been a deck that we've been talking about. But I do like the NoHandsGamer aggressive weapon Rogue. I do find that to be a little bit more of a consistent strategy in some of the decks that we do see. First game is going to be Demon Hunter versus that Rogue.
Demon Hunter.
And we'll see if Muzzy can stop the aggression here. I'm always so afraid as a Rogue of just like taking too much damage early game. And NoHandsGamer already has early minions, which makes it very tough to not take that early damage and eventually get pressured by that Demon Hunter.
Yeah, you just take so long to set up against Soul Demon Hunter as the Secret Rogue, and I feel like the ways you win are by having to force a lot of removal out early on and protect the damage from your face. And also, as weird as it sounds, like I've played a lot of Soul Demon Hunter recently, and the times I lose a Secret Rogue are when they get like this massive plagiarize, because they pressure me early and then all over the plagiarize, then I have to use all these spells to deal with the questing or Edwin, and then they get all those spells and use those to race, like do the exact same thing that I just did to them, but more proactively. Like those are the ways that I've lost to Secret Rogue playing the Soul Demon Hunter. Obviously not a very consistent strategy, so he's not going to keep plagiarize even though he had the ability to. But it feels like those are the kinds of things you need to do. But making threats first, like finding the questings, building up this early tempo, that's how you unlock the ability to win through the method that I just explained. You can't just hope to do that, because then you're just going to be getting little bits and pieces there. You're not forcing all these cards out from the Soul Demon Hunter, and they can play around your secrets much better than you'd expect.
Well, Muzzy really thinking about this turn 2 really in depth of how he wants to utilize it, and there's actually several ways he can go about it. The Dragon's Horde implies that he wants to play the Wand Thief here just to set up the best board. And I guess he could go for a backstab, but backstab also could be really important against oh wow. Find some really powerful spells. Backstab can be really important for cards that he potentially draws as well. If he draws like Evil Miscreant, if he wants to play Edwin Van Cleef, not to mention that there's other bunch of targets that he can use backstab on his opponent as well. That's pretty nice. Spirit Jailer's just not threatening enough for you to want to backstab here.
Yeah, just a 1/3. Wand Maker though, oh, that's a good backstab target. Is that Evil Miscreant? Wow.
Nice. Rewarded. Love to see it. Purely just from a technical play perspective of just not overreacting to simple 1/3, and now getting that Evil Miscreant is huge.
Yep. Early tempo is important. A lot of smaller to medium-sized minions is kind of what you want. You have too many small minions, you're vulnerable to Shard Shatter Mystic. You have too many big or like just a few big minions, you're vulnerable to Blade Dance. You want to find those in-betweeners in order to pressure effectively. Meanwhile, No Hands, he's falling behind on tempo, but I don't think he needs to really go for much panic yet. You can't just Hero Power here, Mana Feeder Panthera, and start getting that card draw going. Does need to find those AoE tools. Now Double Skull in hand. One is already in outcast position in the far left. Guaranteed outcast position. And he should have time. He'll definitely have time to get to that point safely. Especially with combination of Marl Slicer, Soul Shard Lapidary already in hand, and Consume Magic is actually a really potent card to be able to deal with Secret Rogue in particular, because pretty much all of their big threats are like combos, right? They have the Double Questing Adventure and the Edwin Van Cleef. Outside of randomly generated things, those are the main things you're worried about, and Consume Magic completely shuts down both of those.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about like what's the best thing for Muzzy to do on this turn as well, you know, because all those different like outcast stuff is something that will come up later in the game here for Muzzy or for No Hands. For now, Muzzy just has to generate something to do. He's got a lot of awkward mid game. He finds 2 of the exact same lackeys that he's just got. So 2 more faceless lackeys. If he extends too deep into the board, he would end up being very vulnerable to a Charge Rider Mystic. So I think the dagger here makes sense. And the question becomes what you want to hit with those daggers. If you want to kill off the Manfield or Panthera, if you want to hit the Spirit Jailer. Looks like he's going to prioritize keeping his board a little bit sturdier and making things a little bit awkward. Demon Hunter does tend to not want to deal with like these little 1/2s very easily, right? You don't want to commit like Charge Rider Mystic on just a board of Wand Thieves and Miscreant. Yeah. But, you know, at the same time, they get in the way of Blade Dance being really effective. And it just feels like so bad to use like Marrow Slicer and hit the Evil Miscreant.
Yeah. It does get a little bit awkward because you're, especially once you get to a certain point in the game where, like each one of your attacks each turn from your hero is like a big swing. You don't want to be throwing that into little minions, but you also don't want to be clearing up just a couple of 1/1s on the board. That's kind of where the awkwardness comes in. But at a certain point, you do have to like make the decision. All right, how long do I keep fighting for board? What's the point that I just start ignoring everything?
I mean, it looks like it's starting to be that case right now. Like, the idea is that NoHandsGamer says, I have a lot of direct damage. Shows her Lapidary plus the Laybound Adept is 9 damage from the hand over the course of 2 turns. You have another 4 from the Marrow Slicer. And we start considering those things, you actually have a pretty good chance of killing Muzzy or finding a line to kill Muzzy over like 3 or 4 turns. But are you going to acknowledge what Rogue does at all? It's kind of the question that we have in our head. More small incremental value cards through Potion of Illusion here. Play his third Evil Miscreant.
Is bordering on absurd, reckless, unnecessary amounts of value.
I like what you said yesterday, TJ. It's Tavern Brawl value.
Yeah.
Because it's
like
just
so
a bunch
games.
of 1-mana cards that generate a bunch of cheap cards that generate a bunch of other cheap cards. And
yeah,
like Tavern Brawls are designed for you to play like, 25-minute games sometimes with you getting a bunch of different assortment of possibilities.
Yeah. I mean, I gave my idea for the next Tavern Brawl, which is you have 2 cards in your deck. You have Evocation and Mana Cycle.
Alas, poor warlock.
That is funny.
But Outcast Skull dodges Soul Fragments. There were only a few in the deck. 3, I believe, actually 2. So, pretty good. Spirit Jailer, not the best hit to discount on, but it does give you some semblance of board presence. Doesn't mind Charge Rider Mystic, though, which is the card that he's kind of looking for with the way this board is. And this is just super annoying, and this is what I feel. No Hands was talking about strategy of Pain Warrior versus a lot of decks now. It's just super annoying, like Blackies, and then do chip damage, and then finish it off with the Grom and weapon damage and Bloodborne Brutes and whatnot. But I mean, Rogue is incredibly effective at it because Muzzy can look at it. It's like an evil smile.
Yeah,
he's like, I don't even know what to do.
He's like
every
playing
card
like an odd
generates
paladin.
another card.
Yeah, I was gonna say that he's playing like an odd paladin style from like the Witchwood expansion. People who don't know, the Witchwood gave you a card that would upgrade your hero power before the start of the game, and when you upgrade your hero power, it usually does like a double version of whatever you have, usually. So for paladin, you would summon 2 Silverhand Recruits per turn for 2 mana. Muzzy has so much value of all these 1-mana cards that they can summon other things for 1 mana. And so he essentially would just keep summoning this army of 1/1s. And No Hands doesn't want to deal with it, but you can't just take 7 a turn for the rest of the game. Muzzy also is going to overdraw simply because he just has too many cards in hand. Collectively, if No Hands finds a way to play like Sociologist Militia, it would literally be the most full Hearthstone board possible on both sides. We would both be holding like 9 to 10 cards.
Gosh.
And Sociologist Militia would fill up the entire board with 3/3s.
Well,
It's a pretty silly situation.
he can finally get rid of this board with Shard Shatter Mystic, but maybe that's exactly what Muzzy wanted, because now he can actually play his cards. Unfortunately, that also means that No Hands can actually start pushing damage, but, you know,
Right.
At least being able to play his cards is a nice little bonus to this. You even get a Gleef on Adept, which was reduced by the Skull cooldown down, which is a nice little bonus. Down to 16, and still a considerable amount of damage in hand for NoHandsGamer.
Time grows short.
My hand is full.
Edwin, oh my gosh.
Okay. That would have been so nice to have, TJ.
Yeah. I mean, at least we can see, with being able to see both hands, that the Consume Magic would have just shut it down anyway, but, you know, from Muzzy's perspective, that Edwin was juicy.
Yeah. So then what does Muzzy really do here in this spot then? Just has to remove this Glaive Mount Depth, stop that damage. Rogue is kind of in this position where, once more, it's just playing cards.
My business.
Rogue is a solo adventure boss right now, just waiting for you to eventually kill it and collect your loot and add to your dungeon run. Right? It's not actually presenting a meaningful amount of threats.
And one thing I want to point out is I love when players in a situation where it's almost unnecessary still play around Betrayal, Combustion,
Sure.
and Rolling Fireball positioning. Like, it just it warms my heart, and to see that
When they play around it.
when they play around it. Like, it almost like there's so narrow of a situation where it would matter in this case, because this board is likely to just get picked apart anyway. But just making it that much harder. Muzzy actually picks Betrayal. So, and you know what, Dan? One thing I will point out is a lot of times when I say this, the very next turn, players will stop playing around Betrayal, and it was just accidental in the first place, and then we both look like idiots. But I have a lot of faith in No Hands.
No Hands.
And he does. Keep that Spirit Jailer in the middle.
Okay.
Beautiful.
I mean, there's a lot of damage, and Muzzy does get some cards. And No Hands is probably okay with that.
Yeah, not too much use for these cards, to be honest.
Nothing. Power.
Oh my gosh. Another Potion of Illusion.
Yeah, that's
Completely unnecessary.
Ice Barrier.
Ice Bear's huge. Oh
Okay.
my goodness. That changes a lot. And he gets a Pexis Smuggler value.
Oh, sweet! I don't even know if he wants more value. Still, every card that he can play outside of that generates another card. Except for the Betrayal.
That Betrayal was so lackluster. Actually hard for him to get lower value than that Betrayal.
Yep.
Oh, all right, okay. No Hands has. Okay, this is actually kind of a meaningful offensive here because Muzzy has the marrow slicer, which No Hands knows about. So, ice barrier here. He needs to actually consider clearing off a little bit of this board, I think.
Yeah. Also,
can
there's
use
an
these Soul Shears.
Alexstrasza in hand, which can come down next turn. That's pretty insane.
Right. I guess the armor is counteracting that a little bit, though, because Muzzy isn't going down to like 1. He's just shredding all of the armor.
Yeah. Like, how aggressive of a push do you want to make here? No Hands. Like, how much you
I want
expect
to-
forward versus how much you want to push.
I definitely want to use this Lapidary this turn because you can't play Lapidary and the Glaive Bound Adept in the same turn. So you have to try and pressure. I guess the Lapidary, the argument against the Lapidary is that if your opponent did have a card like Alexstrasza, it's a little bit more efficient to use the Glaive Bound Adept because it's more power on the board, plus it does a little bit less damage, so you don't shred nearly as much of his armor plus life total. But I mean, that's such a fringe case scenario, and I don't think it's ever worth playing around.
I bring life.
Alright, well, Alexstrasza is going to come into play here, but still leaving 5 damage on board, and it's not progressing the win condition more outside of an 8-8 on board, but Demon Hunter, one of the better decks at dissecting boards full of large minions.
Ooh.
That's 4, 8, 9. That's it, right? Chaos
That's
Strike.
lethal.
One slice,
Yes,
one slice. Yeah,
that's exactly lethal.
Yeah. All right. You got there. Through
He got there
Alexstrasza,
again.
through Ice Barrier. After pretty much not doing anything for like 2 turns in a row except for drawing cards, Muzzy ends the game with 9. So much value, 9 cards in hand. But it doesn't matter. Like, value doesn't matter if all the Demon Hunter's just gonna be doing is dealing damage to you during that time.
Well, he had Shadow Step, so maybe he felt like he could have Shadow Step the Alexstrasza and out heal his opponent, but that's going to do it for game number 1. No Hands able to pressure just enough and get over that hump. And, you know, we talked about how this might be a lineup struggle for Muzzy. Losing that first game definitely hurts.
Yeah. Soul Demon Hunter was one of the more likely decks to take a win against his entire lineup, so I think he can, you know, say, all right, Soul Demon Hunter was going to beat pretty much all my decks. But honestly, go on the list, and it doesn't get much better. It gets slightly better, but not a whole lot better. And, you know, that's where the big worry comes in for Muzzy in this series. So we'll see, though. Still a lot of series left to play.
Yep, that's right. So that leads us to our next break, and we're going to take a few minutes to get set. When we come back, game number 2 between Muzzy and NoHandsGamer.
Hearthstone Grandmasters is brought to you by T-Mobile. Switch today and rank up to America's largest 5G network. T-Mobile.
Okay, so there's. Oh, wait, how bad is the zombie apocalypse? We're gonna survive, or?
Tough one.
Oh my god.
For a zombie apocalypse, I would take Torben, the Viper. He's pretty strong. I would take Language Hacker. He seems very, very smart. Probably Zilay. Seems like he could, you know, deal with a lot of the threats.
So if there is a zombie apocalypse, I think I would choose. I will definitely not choose Zim or Quiz. I don't trust them. I think I will go with Power Control, Casey, and Gallon. That's the guy I go along with. So
my crew would be Born, Viper, and Bunny.
Bunny is a scientist, so he might find a cure or something like that. Casey can just handle all the zombies with his incredible strength. Thijs can be the bait, and I'll just wait around and help somehow.
Magic school of your legacy of glory shines. May they stand forevermore. Take your place where magic bends to your will, but you'll have to study hard. So many clubs and cults. Excuse me, I misspoke. Take your pick out in the yard. Test your brains or put their spells for a double major honor roll. Just be sure to stay upstairs in the hall. Else Trump will steal your soul.
They're kidding, of course.
Dear Magic School, we vow to stay right and true. Oh, soloists, we love you. Hey, hey, USA!
7本の指か7本の足か選ぶなら7本の足かな。ハーストーンができなくなるのがちょっと怖い。
应该是7只手指吧，因为这样就可以做比较多的事情。然后7个脚趾也不一定会走得比较快。
평소에 손이나 발 사용할 때도 손이 더 활용도가 더 많이 높은 것 같아서 네, 손을 선택했어요.
손가락을 많이 필요로 해본 적이 없어서 저는 오히려 그게 더 편하지 않을까 생각합니다.
아무래도 게임 좀 많이 하다 보니까 좀 더 유리할 거 아니에요? 게임하는데 그래서 손가락 7개인 게 더 나을 것 같습니다.
どちらでもなくて腕を2本増やしたいです。
Welcome back, everyone, to Hearthstone Grandmasters for the Americas. We didn't do our This Day in History fact at the top of the show because we don't write that in our run-up show, TJ. So we figured, I said, we're going to do it at our next break, and lo and behold, 2 hours into the broadcast is when we do it. So today is September 26th, 2020. On This Day in History was when Abbey Road was released by the Beatles in 1969, with of course, being one of their most famous records ever, and making a really large impact in the music industry and many industries, of course, thereof. The entire album length was 47 minutes and 3 seconds, almost as long as that Turtle Mage game that we saw versus the Warrior. So we take a moment to remember of some of the most important things in life, TJ. So taking a look, speaking of things that take 47 minutes, Control Priest coming up here for Muzzy, as we do see a lot of those priests moving away from the Galakron package and more towards just having tools to either disrupt or, tempo out onto the board. Even playing dragons, just in general, to have synergy with things to really pull from your deck or manipulate a bunch of these cards in your hand. So we want to see if this priest can hold up against the rogue. This rogue is definitely one to be considered for our deck spotlight. It's certainly interesting to think about how Self-Sharpening Sword and Volpera Toxin Blade can be really powerful against classes like the priest. But Muzzy's ready with that weapon removal.
Yeah. And I think the Control Priest variant has enough value already to where you don't really need any extra by including Galakron. Like the ultimate late game value matchups that did exist previously, like just Priest Mirrors, I suppose is the big one, are gone. And Galakron becomes kind of a tough inclusion to fit in, maybe a little bit too slow, too expensive to fit in, especially since a lot of times, well, the list that we saw did also fit in Invoke cards. So I actually really like the direction that these Control Priest decks have taken. And I think you do have a lot of room for tech inclusions that can allow you to target specific things. Like Cobalt Sticky Finger, which he does have in his opening hand against a weapon rogue. Well, it's actually not a weapon rogue. It's got one weapon with the Self-Sharpening Sword, but oftentimes that's all it needs. It's got a lot of ways to buff weapons with Volpera Toxin Blade, Deadly Poison, Dr. Krastenov. So I like this deck a lot, but it is one of those decks that can just kind of fall short of the finish line and run out of damage towards the later stages, especially when it's up against weapon destruction.
All right, well, Muzzy taking some time here and really just prioritizing getting early game minions. We might not even get to the weapon destruction stage if No Hands just runs out of the gate with a bunch of stealth minions that you can't answer as Muzzy. Like, forget the blade. What about just having 3/3s or 3/1s hit you for repeated amount of turns?
Just a dagger up.
Okay.
I suppose to play around, not be too vulnerable to
Wild Pyromancer.
Wild Pyromancer. What this also does is give him the option to go Volpera Toxin Blade next turn instead of Greyheart Sage. Be able to deal with, say, a Fairy Dragon and keep his minion alive. So I think that's a pretty heads-up play for No Hands. But there's still a possibility that he may Greyheart Sage. But I think the Volpera Toxin Blade just represents too much value to pass up, because it's not vulnerable to Wild Pyromancer. You get to keep your minion alive while still going the Fairy Dragon. And Volpera Toxin Blade is one of those cards that has recurring value when it's on the board, where Greyheart Sage just gives you that one burst of card draw. And because he held on to Sneaky Delinquent, he will have a guaranteed stealth minion by turn 5 to be able to go for Greyheart Sage. Actually keeps the Spy Mish's stealth too, to go for the ultimate opening with Greyheart Sage without even having to wait until turn 5. And if he hits Deadly Poison, he can then Cutting Class as well. I don't think he would do that if he hit it, but just something to note. Oof.
Yeah, these are some bad spells to get. I guess the nice thing about Power Shield, it's cheap, so if you do find Wild Pyromancer, it's nice. If you have an opportunity to use Cabal Acolyte, that's nice.
A cruel fate awaits you in the ashes.
No Hands finally going for that Greyheart Sage you were talking about. Finds Deadly Poison, the exact combination you were describing.
Will he do it though? That's the question. He can go Deadly Poison Cutting Class, but Deadly Poison does have a lot of value in the matchup. But because it can turn into 6 extra damage in the form of like Sharpening Sword, potentially even more than that. Whereas with another Cutting Class, holy, whoa,
That's a ton of value.
yeah.
Yeah, I like it because also he knows he's coming up on the turn that his opponent could coin out the Sticky Finger. And so this is just a nod to what he knows Muzzy wants to do against this deck, which is very powerful. Forget the kind of like ultimate value that you can get off of Deadly Poison. Prioritize that tempo and drive it.
Yeah. Which against this Priest deck is honestly a great strategy because one of the weaknesses we talked about in yesterday's matches is that they don't have board-wide removal anymore outside of Soul Mirror. Or at least reliable board-wide removal for like small-ish boards. Like Holy Nova, Breath of the Infinite, those cards have largely been cut. But they do have his Wild Pyromancer. But that's one card in your deck that also relies on you having cheap spells in order to use it. Which can work better than, say, Breath of the Infinite or Holy Nova, which are limited to those two things.
Yeah, I think those cards are becoming less important, particularly because there's just fewer decks that can really capitalize on that, or fewer decks that you want to capitalize on by doing that. Zoo Warlock isn't super popular right now, and like you don't really need it against some of the other decks that are currently out there. But against a Stealth Rogue that's killing you on turn 5, I mean, by all means, this is going to be a really fast game victory. NoHandsGamer earns this game 1 spot with a win here over Muzzy with a very fast kill. You can see that Rogue in general seems to be a class that just has the ability to end games super duper quickly. So overall, like we've been seeing some really fast games end because of that Rogue. I think what was it? Last week we saw a turn 5 victory for the Rogue over the Zoo Warlock. I think Briarthorn just like died. And so you can't really sleep on these Rogue decks. And that's like a big difference from what we saw previously, TJ, with the idea that Rogue needs to actually have something proactive to threaten their opponents. When they're kind of stuck playing the value game, sometimes they do a bunch of cutesy stuff and then ends up just not doing anything.
Yeah, and this is what I talked about. First off, I just want to say that early game was very well played by No Hands. Like, if he goes for Stealth Minion on 2 instead of Dagger Up on 2, that game looks completely different. Because while he hits Greatheart Sage, he doesn't get Vulpira Toxin Blade set up early enough to be able to piece together enough damage. So, just expertly played by No Hands in that game. But secondly, this is what I was talking about with how I'm worried for Muzzy's lineup. Like, it just seems like, he's running into a bunch of 55, 45, 60, 40 matchups. Even after you get rid of the Demon Hunter, which, you're staring at some 70-30 matchups against Demon Hunter, which is where I think the Tempo Mage matchup is. A lot of people may disagree with me, but I just do think that matchup is so Demon Hunter's favorite. And so now he's got to beat Malagos Druid 3 times in a row with a Control Priest still left in his lineup, which is one of the worst matchups. So even if he does manage to find like a win here with this Tempo Mage, he's still looking at a very tough series ahead of him. Because Malagos Druid does even have some decent matchups against his list. So this one's going to be rough. I mean, we might see a 3-0, but Tempo Mage can give Malagos Druid some trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those matchups where Mage can get out real quick onto the board, and unless Druid has Guardian Animals or some way to rush immediately to try and pressure right back, it's just going to be too late. So going into game number 3, No Hands immediately coin Innervate, Lightning Bloom, Overgrowth. Down to just one card.
It always looks so weird to me when that happens. but I understand the power level of it. It's just this play is going to get heavily punished from Muzzy because he is playing a list with devolving missiles and has a devolving missiles in hand. If No Hands doesn't pick up anything worthwhile here and does go for the Twilight Runner, which seems like he has to. So No Hands looks like he's just going to run out of gas. The good thing about getting those mana crystals out of the way early to go for the overgrowth is that he will have more options to play once he picks up additional stuff. It's just how far behind will he fall when devolving missiles comes down here if he picks up kind of dead draws for the next 2 turns. That's kind of what I'm worried about here for No Hands. Parachute.
Yeah, that's totally fair. There's a lot of there's a lot riding on him picking up the right card to keep the resource engine going, because right now No Hands is pretty much just hoping that he hits some kind of card draw. Oh gosh. So an early gamble did not pay off, and now No Hands has a lot of mana and a lot of nothing to do. Do you jam this Iron Bark here to try to win back the board?
I don't think so. I mean, he doesn't really have too many things to capitalize on it. The problem is if you think you're going to fall too far behind on board, maybe you need to wait until you can play like a big dragon and then taunt it up, right? Whereas like going for incremental value in the early game here is not how you win with Malagos Druid when you have like a poor start like this. And to be clear, I don't fault No Hands for going for that play. Devolving Missiles is a one-of. The upside of that type of play that he went for in the early game is massive. If that Twilight Runner sticks and he gets to draw cards, he banked the early mana crystals, which means his next few turns could have been insane. It just so happens that Muzzy has had, near perfect answers to what No Hands has decided to do with this early game, and now he's just going to be in a world of hurt. Jandis Brav is like the perfect complement to this early disruption start, and he guessed correctly at least.
Yeah, this looks pretty. This looks just really one-sided here. Like No Hands has nothing to do. He's waiting to die slowly until he draws something of impact, and I mean, it's kind of been a while. It's kind of been a long time since I've seen someone all in and whiff this hard with Druid. But like generally the average draw doesn't really whiff nearly as bad as this currently does. Okay, Nature Studies.
Yeah.
Maybe?
Starfire.
Okay.
Because it will cost 5, so we can hero power down the Raz, which I think is more threatening in the long term, because it's essentially a 4/6 at minimum.
Right.
And honestly, like we can call it an all-in, but let's say No Hands didn't go for that play. His hand would still be terrible.
Right.
He would just have like Lightning Bloom and Innervate instead of Iron Bark and Moonfire, and he'd have less mana, or would have had to wait a turn to play the Twilight Runner, and then got punished later on, not knowing what the game plan would be. So it would have been even worse, I think, if he had not spent that mana and used those cards earlier on. Now, I mean, Geppetto is card draw, and it's also a way for him to pull some, big meanings out of his deck. Let's say he gets Ysera Unleashed from Geppetto, and then draws Guardian Animals or Overflow. Because he's drawn like the lower half of his deck, he does have a lot of those big cards left, and he'll have 9 mana crystals going the next turn, which means anything he draws he can play, and he does have some big stuff left. He's at 16 though, but Muzzy's, I guess his pressure's not really waning, right? He's still a 5/6.
No,
even though he can't get Mana Giant down this turn, he's still developing.
Yeah.
But Geppetto does need to be pretty big, or he needs to pick up something off the top that's even more.
Okay.
All right, whatever.
Maybe he draws Omu or something.
He needs. I mean, Alexstrasza, he has to use it now, right?
Yeah.
Because there's 10 power on board, 11 with the ping. He could Iron Bark, and then not Alexstrasza and just play Teacher's Pet, and then hope that he can Alexstrasza for more value. I mean, it's just a
Right.
1/1 too. It's heal. It's a 1/1 that heals 4. It's like a crystal power.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time kind of imagining any kind of line here for No Hands, but he's just pretty much in desperation mode. It's like how long he can survive for, or maybe hoping that Mage whiffs, which is unlikely given the current state of things.
Mage doesn't whiff. With 7
can.
cards in hand, or 6 cards in hand, Mage doesn't whiff.
It totally can, just a lot of times, as you mentioned, it does not.
All in due time.
As it does seem like we're just kind of waiting here to see if Muzzy's got the goods.
Yeah. So, I wonder what he could go for Lab Partner with the Rays of Frost. That's enough to summon an elemental and kill off this Geppetto with a trade from the Black Mage.
Right.
And then he will have enough mana for a Mana Giant.
What's against me?
Because of the
I think it's the best play, just to threaten your opponent. They played one of their Geppetto minions, so you know that they don't have the opportunity for like the Omu and the Malagos. And I think that even in the worst case scenario, you should be good to go. Muzzy.
Well, he's at 1. Maximum Alex.
Oh my gosh.
All right. So he drew every 0-cost card.
Right. All of them.
All of them.
Great. It's exactly what I want to do with my turns after I ramp. I want to play 0-mana cards.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
absolutely
there's
brutal for No Hands
13
Gamer.
damage on board. 8 mana available with Evocation. Even like Arcane Missiles, there's a Fireball.
It's just so one-sided at that point, but that's gonna do it. Game number 1, or game number 3 rather, goes to Muzzy here. The first game number 1 of Muzzy's comeback victory if he wants to try to reverse sweep this. As the early all-in did not pay off whatsoever for NoHandsGamer. That was kind of unusual. You don't usually see someone low rolled like that. That was definitely unusual.
Yeah, that was. I mean, that happens though, right? That's kind of the built-in failure rate of Druid. That's kind of what makes Guardian Animals seem somewhat okay. It's not fully okay, but somewhat okay because all these support cards that you're playing in your deck to make it so you can play Guardian Animals faster. Sometimes you draw those and no Guardian Animals, and then you just look silly, like in that instance. But I mean, I think No Hands did the best with what he could, right? That all in early to get the Overgrowth Mana Crystals is what even allowed him to have a chance to recover from his Twilight Runner getting Evolving Missiles. But it is tough. All right, so Muzzy going to move to the Rogue, which is the better of his 2 matchups against Malagos Druid. He's got a lot of tools to disrupt the game plan of Malagos Druid. He's got the double Cult Neophyte in his deck, which can help, one, interrupt some of the key ramp or power turns, like going into like an Overgrowth turn or a Guardian Animals turn. And then he's also got these big questings, which, while Malagos Druid has more removal than Survival Druid, they don't have animated Broomstick, which can allow them to utilize minions to trade. They have to use the removal, which then ends up, ditching some of their win condition with Malagos in the later stages. So this one is pretty close, can be pretty close. But again, Rogue just feels like one of those decks where it either steamrolls or gets steamrolled. We did have one of the rare occasions earlier on today where we got to see Monsanto against Turtle Mage piece together a very creative win condition with some randomly generated cards. But, that's about all you can hope for against matchups like that. And
right. No, you're completely right. It's really tricky for some of these rogues to find a way to pressure significantly. You can see Muzzy just went for tempo. Because that just might be the best course of action to try and win the board eventually and pressure Druid and hope that they don't end up having the curve that really destroys you.
Well, we have our first crossroads here. Has the option to play Dirty Tricks, which I was going to say I like better, or go for Feral Cat Wand Thief. But with Edwin in hand, if you dump Feral Cat Wand Thief now, you're giving up fodder for Edwin. And also, by getting Dirty Tricks online right now, Malagos Druid just wants to play spells. Like, that's almost all they want to do in the early stages of the game. So you end up even picking up more fodder for the Edwin. So it's a double whammy, so to speak.
I like the sound of that. Just being able to get as much stats as possible. Okay. Questing Adventurer pickup. What can we really do with this here?
I wonder.
That's actually tough.
Is it just Questing Adventurer here?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but there's so much ability for No Hands to remove it. But he does have the Edwin in hand, and the upside of just playing Questing is huge. Like, No Hands is playing the double Crystal Power list, which means that if he has Moonfire or Crystal Power, he kills it on the spot. But those aren't necessarily cards that you keep, so he would have to have drawn into it. Draws the Crystal Power, Muzz is like, yep, that one's rough.
Yeah.
And also gets to coin interbate out this wild growth, or this overgrowth. So pretty much worst case scenario from Muzzy's perspective, but I like the risk there, because if that questing does stick, if No Hands does whiff on the removal, then Muzzy just runs away with the game, essentially.
Right. I agree. I think that it had a lot of upside, and even though Muzzy's pretty disappointed that it didn't work out, I think you gotta really take those kinds of risks. I guess Muzzy feels like he's not making any momentum at all against Druid, which is what's so frustrating. Like, they're ramping, they're gonna play bigger minions, you're not having any board presence. And he draws Cult Neophyte a turn too late.
Oh. Wasteful Assassin is actually pretty good.
Yeah, it's just... Is it too slow, though? Right? Like, that's kind of the big question. Like, do you have the time to be able to play it on 5 and feel confident going to your opponent's Guardian Animals turn?
Yeah, that's true. But... like, you do need... What you need to do, oftentimes in this matchup, is, get a big board state down and then protect it with... like a Cold Neophyte, for example. And so if he sticks a Wasteful Assassin and then can get a big Edwin with a Cold Neophyte on the board, then all of a sudden he has these two big threats that are protected with the increased cost of the spells. So...
What to do?
Okay. Yeah, I guess I can buy it. Either way, NoHandsGamer is not going to stop his ramp. He just picked up Ysera, which means that Overgrowth allows him to play it on curve for the following turn.
Yep.
And then at turn 10, or not turn 10, but rather the 10 mana turn, has the ability to play...
Turn 6?
Turn 6. Has the ability to play Twilight Runners. Or even just as Geppetto. So that way he can get card draw going. Big difference right now is that he actually has things to fill up his mana curve this game, and previously he did not. As you can see him being really unhappy. Just this looks like NoHandsGamer has finally the Druid hand that is worth, worth actually ramping for.
Yeah. The Ysera, though, with the Professor on board is kind of awkward because like a backstab kills it because his spells are poisonous.
Right.
Which made me think that I wanted to play the Twilight Runner there instead. And kill the Professor. See, this is starting, the pressure's starting to mount, especially since Muzzy has the ability to go for a big swing next turn. Let's say No Hands plays the Ysera Unleashed here. He goes Cold Neophyte Wand Thief, gets the activation for Vendetta. Vendetta is the Ysera Unleashed, which kills it.
Right.
And then can play Edwin Van Cleef, which is now an 8/8, and he has Colt Neophyte with a ton of power on board. So this is a risky Ysera, to say the least. And this is looking like quite a promising opening for Muzzy.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing about it, though, right? Like, Muzzy here is really hoping that there isn't any kind of Guardian Animals action going on to really help him cement his board state, but it's scary because now there's a lot of, like, potential on both sides. How does Muzzy press in here for the win?
Holy crap. If he picks up a spell that he can prep out as well, this Edwin's going to be massive. So he can go Cold Neophyte, Wand Thief, look for something to play for 2 or less mana that's like beneficial. Imagine if he picks Ancient Mysteries from the Wand
that
Thief.
would be just
he can
the
draw a Secret from his
nastiest.
deck, which is free with the prep, and then play that, and then go for an even bigger Edwin. And all the while getting to Vendetta down this Ysera Unleashed, which is poisonous.
Okay, Frostbolt is something that he can utilize now.
Yep. Oh, that's actually lethal.
And it looks
because
good.
his spells are poisonous. And he just Frostbolts the face.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Late poisonous to face.
I'm pretty sure that's game over. This is just too insane. His spells cost 1 more, so he can't go for like some crazy like Malagos clears unless he gets some massive portals here, which is unlikely.
Okay.
Because he has a lot of cards left in deck. Only 7 are portals. There's 1. All right. Well, a good start. There's 2.
Okay. Chrono Breaker actually has potential relevance. If he ends up using Geppetto Joybuzz and gets Malagos in his hand, that would be very amusing. But it actually doesn't even solve the bigger issue, which is he still has to kill this Edwin Van Cleef right now. So I think NoHandsGamer has to draw here with the Breath of Dreams.
And look for more portals. Like the decision to ramp on the turn, where he could have played Twilight Runner instead, and go for the Ysera Unleashed. Really
too greedy.
Coming back to bite him. I don't know if it's too greedy because honestly, like, you kind of need to accelerate the game plan, and getting those mana crystals, might have been his key. Even if imagine if Edwin wasn't there, maybe that's what he needed to be able to play like double 5-drop faster, like you mentioned, turn 10, or on the 10 mana turn, fell into the same trap you did.
Oh no, totally. I understand exactly what NoHandsGamer's line of play was. I'm just saying that it ended up being too greedy. Like he tried to go for like gold and just forgot that. Well, not forgot, but we don't realize how explosive Rogue can sometimes be if they do get a lot of mid-range pressure going. So overall, I would say that the Rogue was pretty successful in that. But we do have the Priest versus the Druid still coming up, TJ, and kind of as you mentioned. This is a matchup that Priest does not want to go up against. So overall, like you still got to think this is NoHandsGamer's series in terms of the advantage. But that was still a really nice win for Muzzy because maybe Control Priest can do something. Maybe has an opportunity to find some crazy combination of cards to tempo out the Druid in the beginning stages and make Druid's life, pretty difficult to get started on.
Yeah. Tempo is the key. Tempo is the absolute key for the Control Priest. Long gone are the days of Mindrender or Lucia being the bane of Malagos Druid's existence. Players are largely cutting that card because the meta has largely sped up. And Mindrender being 3 mana doesn't allow you enough space to be able to use it against anything that's not like a combo deck. And there's just not enough combo decks in the metagame to make Mindrender Lucia worth putting in your deck in most situations, at least in like a competitive conquest environment. So you do have to rely on tempo. But Priest does have a lot of good tempo tools. You can see one of them in the hand, or a couple of them in the hand already. The Cabal Acolyte plus Wave of Apathy combo, as well as Draconid Studies, which can find you some, big dragons that you can play slightly cheaper. And unsurprisingly, Muzzy does keep those 3 cards. And so he does have, the start that can run away with a game against Malagos Druid, because Malagos Druid, even though, yes, you think, Control Priest is just too slow, Malagos Druid has all this time to set up the combo, they really don't do much for a large portion of the game. And if you have an answer to like one big minion and can use that big minion to then continue to push, or at least force some of those removal spells or burn spells, as they become, the swipe and the Moonfire, then all of a sudden you have to worry about less breakpoints with the combo, and then it does just become a tempo value battle in the later stages of the game. Like, I haven't had a Malagos Druid versus Priest game in a while that's been cut and dry to the point where the Priest doesn't pressure, the Malagos Druid assembles the combo and 30s you. It's a rare sight to see. Oftentimes what it becomes is both players are fighting for board, and then the Malagos Druid eventually like sticks a big board of dragons from Ysera Unleashed, and that's how they win.
Yeah.
But
I've seen that a lot too.
Yeah, both are threatening win conditions, and so that's why like you have even more incentive to just go for as much tempo as humanly possible in the early stages of the game. Try and force all these resources out, force the Druid to play like off curve, inefficiently, and then before they can get their combo online or the Ysera Unleashed plus the portals online, that's when you go in. Crimson Hothead, perfect pickup to start things off.
Yeah.
It's a dragon that's not vulnerable to the Starfall.
Yeah, not something that you really plan around very often, but yeah, just having something stick. And I think you really summarized the matchup very well, which is this dynamic that Druid and Priest both might be looking for alternative game plans than their traditional ones that they're used to in order to win this game. But it realistically also could just come down to what we normally expect here. NoHands really hovering over the Starfall, trying to think if it's worth it all. Trying to snipe or preemptively place this damage into the Crimson Hothead. TJ, you're not loving it.
I don't know about that. Now, granted, we can see the hands, and it's easy for us to say, all right, he can just renew this and heal it, and he's good. This almost guarantees that NoHands has to use a swipe to be able to clear this off next turn. Whereas if he just like Hero Powers and goes stays, he can take the damage and then like Starfall, Innervate Hero Power next turn to guaranteed kill it. But let's say Muzzy goes for like a Twilight Drake, for example, in this instance, and then he would take damage, only have the Starfall in hand, have pigeonholed himself into Starfall, Innervate Hero Powering the Crimson Hothead, and then he'd be taking damage from a Twilight Drake, which would be a much worse situation to be in. But from Muzzy's perspective, yeah, just heal this up. You wasted a whole turn using that pretty big Nature Studies pickup on this Crimson Hothead, obviously setting up for some type of removal. Oh, he draws Moonfire, so he has an answer to it anyway, but it's an expensive answer in the form of having to use these burn spells and essentially cutting off a lot of his ability to combo in the later stages of the game with Malagos if he uses a swipe and a Moonfire to deal with this. But honestly, can you leave a 4/6 on the board and hope that you'll be able to deal with eventually? No, you can't, because you won't even have time to combo.
Right. It's one of those things where if you value your primary game plan too much, it feels like you're giving your opponent the opportunity to execute their primary game plan, which is to build up big stats and not give Druid the freedom to be able to draw cards comfortably. And so I agree. I think NoHandsGamer has to take this down, and Muzzy has to restart building the board. That Crimson Hothead was pretty important. Does pick up the Wand Maker. There's an opportunity to drop this 1-mana spell. I think the Mind Flayer cards is also pretty interesting because your opponent's kind of showing that they will take drastic measures in order to try and kill your board. Ooh, well, he just wants to Crimson Hothead again.
Sure. Look how much resources NoHands used to deal with the first one. Why not just go for the second one? With 6 power on board, and now NoHands is back to square one, minus Nature Studies. The Nature Studies spell is a swipe and a Moonfire. Okay, well, Breath of Dreams is good because it will draw him a card. He needs to get closer to this Guardian Animals, and does ramp as well. So next turn he can play down that Ysera Unleashed. So the swipe here, yeah, at this point, like, you've used the swipe on Moonfire, completely abandoned the combo. He may not have the opportunity to spend the 4 mana on the swipe for a while, given how aggressive of a start Muzzy's been able to piece together, at least aggressive for a priest. So he might as well just get the mana expenditure out of the way now, because that 2 damage from that Wand Maker, you know, if his next turn is Ysera Unleashed, and then his next turn he's still not dealing with it because he has to play something else to draw cards and pull portals out of his deck, that 2 damage quickly turns into 4, 6, 8, and then you know, maybe he falls too far behind and doesn't have time. So I do like getting rid of the mana while I can on the swipe, even though it's not the highest value in the world. But all Acolyte, we have Apathy waiting on the other side for the Ysera Unleashed.
Yeah, this is not going to end up really well. And Muzzy has the Inner Fire. So not only does he have the ability to steal the Ysera, he can use it to deal 12 damage.
Holy moly. Oh. It's like I talked this whole series about the crux of Muzzy's lineup being, you know, if he takes like the expected losses, it would come down to Malagos Druid versus Priest and how poor of a matchup that can sometimes be. And now he's just like destroying.
So one-sided. I mean, you correctly.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you correctly said No Hands is not going to have the time to be able to use things like swipe. He's dead next turn.
Yeah.
Literally, no matter what he does, he's dead.
You got to think, did NoHandsGamer forget to put Guardian Animals in his deck? Because I don't think we've seen it drawn a single time in the 3 games he's played with Malagos Druid.
Oh no, poor No Hands.
Yeah.
This looks so bad.
Yeah. And keep in mind, No Hands was in first place in the division going into this week. Lost to Eddie in the first series that we saw yesterday. Eddie had a fantastic lineup read on No Hands and was just able to, you know, pretty much crush him. You know, there's no other way around it. But yeah, Muzzy.
Wow.
Getting the reverse sweep.
Yeah.
And what a brutal end to that series for No Hands. He probably felt like he was in such a good spot after taking those first couple wins and, you know, just kind of getting the brutal end of some Malagos Druid games towards the end of that series.
Yeah, that one was pretty hard to watch because it just felt like No Hands' Druid games, 2 of them, he didn't really even get to really do anything with his Druid deck. He was just simply like waiting to die, and Muzzy was generating like lots of tempo. And I feel like that's kind of the name of the game right now with a lot of these lineups. Like, can you generate enough threats to kill decks that will amass resources to combo you? And Muzzy was able to do exactly that. So a job well done. Reverse sweep. Muzzy has secured a spot in the playoffs. The first player from Division A to be able to do so.